Chapter 1: The Legend of the Book of Death. The monastery on the hilltop had long stood in desolation, surrounded by a dense forest, its walls covered in moss and cracks. Locals avoided this place, speaking of an ancient legend that had circulated for decades. They said that the monastery hid the Book of Death, an ancient artifact containing secrets that should never be revealed. Stories of curses and mysterious deaths surrounded this book, and those who tried to find it vanished without a trace. These stories did not scare two young explorers, Alex and Max. They were fascinated by mysticism and ancient artifacts and were confident they could uncover the secret of the Book of Death. After months of research, they finally pinpointed the monastery's location and set out on their journey. Chapter 2: The Journey. The journey took them 7 hours. The road was winding, and with each kilometer the forest became denser and darker. Finally, they reached the monastery. It looked as if time itself had retreated before its ancient walls. Deep cracks were visible on them, and the roof was covered with moss. The atmosphere around the building was heavy, almost tangible, as if the place itself resisted their presence. Rain began to fall, and the boys hurried inside. As soon as they entered, the door slammed shut with a crash, making them jump. Alex and Max rushed to the door, trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped. Chapter 3: Searching for the Book. The monastery's corridors were dirty, old candles and crosses hanging everywhere. Strange drawings in the form of pentagrams were visible on the walls. They began their search for the book, moving from room to room to find nothing. Suddenly, they heard whispers behind one of the doors. Max, with trembling hands, opened the door, and they saw a spiral staircase leading down. The walls were lit by torches, and strange whispers in an unknown language emanated from below. Chapter 4: Descent into the Underground. The boys were terrified but decided to continue their search. Max took a revolver with 3 bullets from his backpack, and they headed down. As they descended, they felt the cold penetrating their bones, their hearts pounding wildly. At the bottom, they discovered a room illuminated by flickering light. A rotten smell hung in the air. Chapter 5: Encounter with the Monk. The walls of the room were covered with pentagrams, and hanging bodies, covered in blood, surrounded them. Suddenly, a pentagram glowed, and a monk emerged from the darkness. He looked like an old man in a black robe with a cross around his neck. In his hands was the very book. The monk did not attack them, he simply asked who they were and what they were doing there. The boys replied that they had come for the Book of Death. The monk ordered them to leave, but Max pointed his gun at him and demanded the book. The monk smiled and handed them the book. As they headed back, the monk said, "You have made a grave mistake." Chapter 6: The Way to Freedom. They reached the door, but it was locked. Max shot the lock, but the door still wouldn't open. Then they saw a broken window and decided to exit through it. As soon as they stepped into the forest, the sky became overcast, and it grew very dark. They tried to find their way back to the road, but the forest seemed to confuse them. Realizing they were lost, they took a break, sitting under a tree, and opened the book. All the pages were blank. Chapter 7: The Curse of the Book. The same old man emerged from the forest and told them they would die in 3 minutes. The boys laughed, but suddenly the book glowed, and Alex's name was written in blood on the first page. The forest came alive, and Alex began to hear voices calling him. He turned into a zombie, walking into the depths of the forest, ignoring Max. Max, left alone, rushed to the car, but the forest seemed to entangle him. Suddenly, he saw the book on the ground with an arrow pointing in the opposite direction. Turning around, he saw Alex hanging from a tree. Chapter 8: The Final Encounter. Max screamed and ran further. The monk stood in his way. Max shot him, but the monk only laughed and walked away. Max realized the book was cursed and that anyone who took it would die within 3 minutes. He kept walking and saw his car. Getting in, he tried to start it, but the car wouldn't start. Suddenly, someone knocked on the back window. The book lay before him with the inscription, "You are next," and on the next page was his name. Chapter 9: The End. The monk emerged from the forest, pulled Max out of the car, approached the edge of a cliff, and pushed him down. A few days later, the boy's parents contacted the police, but the search yielded no results. One evening, someone knocked on Alex's parents' door. The father opened it and saw the monk. He said that their son had disturbed the peace of the monastery's dead, for which the book had punished him. The monk and the book were the guardians of the monastery, protecting it from intruders. Those who entered the monastery for the book were doomed to die within 3 minutes.